State's next witness.
State calls Dr. Kelley.
Fine.
Your Honor, state calls Dr. Kelley.
Fine. Dr. Higgins. Raise your right hand, be sworn in, please.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Please be seated. State your full name, spelling first and last for the record.
My name is Philip Douglas Kelley, Philip Kelley.
Doctor, you can take the mask off, it's easier
For everybody, if that's okay with you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
How are you employed?
I'm the Deputy Chief Medical Examiner for the Milwaukee County Medical Examiner's Office.
How long have you been a medical examiner?
Well, since 1999.
In order to hold a position as a medical examiner, do you have to have any specialized training or experience?
Yes.
Can you briefly go over that with us?
Okay. And I should qualify that by saying that in the state of Wisconsin, a medical examiner is just an appointed official and does not have to be a forensic pathologist. But a forensic pathologist does have to have certain qualifications.
Are you a forensic pathologist?
And I am a forensic pathologist, yes.
And in fact, to work at the Milwaukee County Medical Examiner's Office, all your doctors are pathologists, right?
That's correct.
Forensic pathologists.
Yes.
Now, in order to be a forensic pathologist, could you briefly tell me what your training and your experience is?
Certainly. I did my college at Illinois Wesleyan University. I went to medical school at Southern Illinois University School of Medicine. I did 2 years of internal medicine residency also with Southern Illinois University. And that's about the time I decided to be a forensic pathologist. So I did my pathology training with St. Louis University School of Medicine. And then got a fellowship position, a forensic pathology fellowship position with the Milwaukee County Medical Examiner's Office, which is how I came to Wisconsin.
And how long have you been, you said you've been a forensic pathologist and a medical examiner since 1999?
Yes, I finished my training in 1999.
And how many different offices have you worked in as a forensic pathologist?
I started here and I actually came back to this office about 4 years ago. So I have been in 5 offices.
Previous to becoming the deputy chief here, where were you?
I was the chief medical examiner for the Fond du Lac County Medical Examiner's Office.
Okay. Have you testified as an expert before in the field of forensic pathology?
Yes.
Approximately how many times?
I couldn't even tell you. Many times over 20 years.
Okay. And this probably is another question you probably can't answer. Approximately how many autopsies do you think you've done?
I'm around 6,000 autopsies at this point in my career.
Okay. Now, what is forensic pathology?
Well, pathology is the study of disease and trauma in the human body. And forensic pathology is a subspecialty in medicine that takes it to the level of applying it to the field of law. And by that I mean, as a forensic pathologist, I determine cause and manner of death and certify death certificates. So we make legal certifications on how and why people die.
And, Doctor, is basically is kind of two of the questions you're looking at, the cause of death and the manner of death.
Yes.
What does cause of death mean?
Well, cause of death is the why people die. So it's basically it involves that unbroken chain of events that leads to somebody's death. So things like heart attacks and trauma to the head and gunshot wounds, those are causes of death.
What's manner of death?
Now, manner of death is how people die. And so for certifying deaths, we have 5 categories that we use to certify the manner of death. There's natural deaths, accidents, suicides, homicides, and then there's undetermined cases.
What's the definition of a homicide?
Basically, homicide means death at the hands of another. It's a standard definition of that.
And I want to be very clear, when you're coming to a medical conclusion as to a manner of death being a homicide, you're not making any legal conclusions, are you?
No.
When you say it's a homicide, you're just saying someone died at the hands of another person.
That's correct.
Okay. So, self-defense would be declared a homicide by you.
Yes.
Traffic-related drunk drivings, are those referred to as accidents as opposed to homicides?
We call those accidents.
Okay. So again, this is just a medical conclusion that you're coming up with based on how the medical examiner's office in the state of Wisconsin classifies certain deaths.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, additionally, doctor, are you licensed to practice medicine in the state of Wisconsin?
Yes.
All right. As a medical examiner, as a forensic pathologist, do you have to perform the autopsy in order to come to a conclusion as to the cause and the manner of death?
Not always, but in a majority of cases, we do perform autopsies.
In fact, you perform a number of autopsies.
Yes.
Are you able to, in your field, look at the work of another forensic pathologist, their notes, the photos, the report, diagrams, things like that, in order to come to a independent medical conclusion as to the cause and the manner of death?
Certainly.
In fact, in this case, is that what you did?
Yes, in this case, that's what has taken place.
Were you the doctor that did the autopsy as to Mr. Cleereman?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Have you reviewed the photos taken from that autopsy?
Yes, I did.
Have you reviewed the notes taken during that autopsy?
Yes,
Have you reviewed the report?
I did.
Was there sufficient information that you were able to come to your own independent expert medical opinion as to the cause and manner of death?
Yes.
Okay. Are you familiar with what, and I sometimes get this wrong, what's referred to as the anatomic correct position?
Yes.
What is that?
Well, the anatomic position is a standard position of the body that we use in order so that we can all communicate and know what each other's talking about. So because the body bends and twists and moves, the anatomic position is referring to the body standing straight up with the palms forward and staring straight ahead. So that's the anatomic position. So anytime we refer to left, we're talking about the person's left, right, person's right, up, down, back, front. They're all relative to the person and not to the observer.
Okay. And in this case, the autopsy was performed by a Dr. Jacob Smith, is that correct?
That's correct.
He's now a forensic pathologist in another state.
He is.
All right. Now, doctor, during your review of this case, were you able to observe whether or not the victim in this case had suffered any injuries to his body?
Yes.
What were those?
Well, to start with, he has a gunshot wound to the head. The entrance wound is to the left eyebrow. There's no exit wound. There was actually a bullet recovered from just under the scalp in the back of the head. In addition to the gunshot wound, there were abrasions or scrapes to the skin that involved the left side of the face, very long brush abrasions. There were some additional abrasions to the left side of the mouth. He also had 2 lacerations or tears to the skin that were to the right eyebrow, and a small abrasion to the bridge of the nose, the right side of the bridge of the nose. And then he also had some abrasions that involved the back of the left shoulder, the side of the left arm, and to the back of the left hand. So those were the injuries that Dr. Smith documented in his report and with photographs.
Okay. Now, to begin with, when you refer to a number of the abrasions, were some of those consistent potentially with the victim falling to the ground after dying?
Yes.
Okay. Before we get to that, you had mentioned that he appeared to have injuries to both sides of his face. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What side of the face was the gunshot wound on?
The left side.
And where was it again?
Is basically to the mid-left eyebrow.
Okay. Did he have any injuries to the right side of his face?
Yes.
I want to show you what has been marked as State's Exhibit number 49. Do you recognize that photo?
Yes, I do.
And what is that a photo of, Doctor?
This is a photo of the right eye, Mr. Cleereman's right eye, and it shows the 2 lacerations or cuts to the right eyebrow.
Your Honor, may I publish this photo?
Yes.
Now, Doctor, we can see at first what appears to be these 2 lacerations or straight tears. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then kind of in the bridge of the nose, what are we seeing?
That's a small abrasion or scrape to the bridge of the nose.
And kind of under by the eyelid, what are we looking at there?
There is a little more bruising that's involving the upper and lower eyelids.
You said bruising. Would this maybe be consistent with kind of like a black eye or something along those lines?
Yes, a lot of bruising directly around the eye is related to some skull fractures to the base of the skull.
Now, Doctor, if Mr. Cleereman were punched on the right side of his face and he wore glasses, are any of these injuries potentially consistent with that impact towards his face?
Yes, they are.
What are we talking about here?
Well, if you notice, the 2 lacerations are somewhat in parallel, and certainly that would, I have seen that caused by the frame of glasses from people who have fallen onto the ground on their face. The small abrasion to the right side of the bridge of the nose, the little, I can never remember the name of it, but the small brace that goes against the bridge of the nose would possibly be driven against the skin and creating this scrape to the nose. So this is consistent with something like that.
Okay. Just to be clear, though, you don't know exactly what caused these injuries.
No, I don't. I'm just saying that this is consistent with that possibility.
He has them. They were documented. You've seen them in these photos.
Yes.
All right. Just another thing when we're looking at here, what are we looking at them towards the bottom of State's Exhibit number 49?
Well, that's the scale or the photo label, so it has the unique identifier for the autopsy case, and obviously has the scale or the ruler.
And if we're looking for photos related to this autopsy, this is going to be the number that we're going to want to see. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I want to show you what has been marked as State's Exhibit number 47. Ask if you take a look at that for me, tell me if you recognize it.
Yes, I do.
What is it?
This photograph is of the left side of the decedent's face.
And, Your Honor, for the record, based on discussions that the court has had with counsel and myself, I do have a post-it just kind of over the eye, because there's a portion of that that's a little graphic that we don't really need to go into. Here show on the picture. But just so we're looking at that, what are we seeing in that eye before we show the photo?
The eye itself, the eye itself has hemorrhage to the eye globe and to the conjunctiva.
Okay, so that's kind of,
I'm sorry.
To the eye globe and the conjunctiva. CONJUNCATIVA.
Your Honor, may I publish?
Any objection?
No objection.
Yes.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 67. Doctor, what are we looking at here?
You're looking at a wide swath of abrasion or scraping. So this is a brush abrasion, and you can see that it has kind of a linear orientation down the side of the face, which kind of gives you an idea about the direction that the scrape went from, top to bottom, bottom to top, something like that. It's in that orientation. You can see the abrasion is also located to the left side of the mouth, left upper and lower lips, and there's a little abrasion even over there to the left earlobe.
And the manner in which we see it, could this be consistent with the victim falling, basically face first onto cement stairs or pavement?
Yes, it could be from scraping along concrete or something like that.
Okay. I want to draw your attention to the eyebrow, right above our little post-it note. What are we seeing there, Doctor?
That's the entrance gunshot wound.
When you say an entrance gunshot wound, what does that mean?
That's basically where the bullet entered his head.
Are you familiar with the terms perforating and penetrating gunshot wounds?
Yes.
What are perforating and penetrating gunshots?
Well, perforating is a term that's used to indicate that a projectile entered the body and exited the body, whereas penetrating means that it penetrated into the body but did not exit the body.
And in this case, was this gunshot wound a perforating or a penetrating?
Well, this would be a penetrating gunshot wound.
Was a bullet recovered inside the victim?
It was.
Where?
It was recovered from just beneath the scalp on the left side of the back of the head.
Now, doctor, from where the bullet entered to where it ends up being recovered on the left side of the back of the head, is there a trajectory that this bullet took within the victim's head?
Yes.
What is that trajectory?
Well, it's front to back and was slightly upwards. There was no left-right deviation.
So when you're saying slightly upwards, what does that mean?
It just means that it's from its entry point to the side of the bullet. The trajectory is slightly upwards from front to back.
And, Your Honor, for the record, the doctor kind of had his hand kind of at a slight upward angle. Is that correct, doctor?
Yes.
Okay, so what you're saying is that what we're looking at is this slight upward angle from when it enters and then continues. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, can you tell us exactly how the victim was situated? Standing, sitting, laying down when this bullet enters his head?
No. From the autopsy, I can't tell you what orientation the decedent was in, whether he was standing or sitting or whatever. I also can't tell you anything about the person who shot him.
Is that because depending on how a person is, standing, sitting, moving, any one of those could change what you're looking at?
Right, there are a lot of different possibilities. I can certainly tell you whether something is conceivable if it's possible, but I can't tell you exactly what the orientation of the body was.
All we know is that the bullet started at a slightly lower angle and moved slightly upwards. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, so kind of going from a lower in and then just slightly up within the head.
Correct.
Okay. Now, also you said there's no left-right deviation?
That's correct.
So this is a straight-on shot, basically right into the victim's head. Is that correct?
Through the head, yes.
What path did it take within his head?
Well, it passed through the left side of the brain.
Now, are you familiar with the term range of fire characteristics?
Yes.
What does that mean?
From the autopsy, there are certain things that we can note that can give us some idea about the distance that the skin was from the end of the gun. So from muzzle to skin, that's a range of fire or a distance of fire. And we use some of the findings on the skin in order to determine what the possible range of fire is. And to be more specific, there's more than just the bullet that comes out of the end of the gun. So there's flame, there's smoke and soot, and of course smoke and soot, they're not very aerodynamic, so they fall away very quickly, lose energy and fall away. So after about a foot, you don't have any deposition of soot on the surface of the body. There's also gunpowder, believe it or not. All the gunpowder doesn't always burn up during the discharge, so gunpowder comes out of the end of the gun. And again, if you're close enough to the skin, that gunpowder has enough energy that when it hits the skin, it can create little abrasions or scrapes. It can even embed itself in the skin. And when we see that, we refer to that as an intermediate range gunshot wound. Typically, and of course, it depends on the gun, determining what the distance can be. It depends on the gun, but for the most part, intermediate range gunshot wounds indicate that the shot came from somewhere within 4 feet.
Somewhere within 4 feet.
Yes.
Can you be any more specific than that?
No, you could be a little more specific by test firing the weapon. You could look at the distribution of the stippling, the gunpowder stippling, or those scrapes. You could look at that and measure that, and then you could test fire the weapon and see how far out that size of a pattern is made. So you could compare those. But beyond that, I can only tell you that gunpowder stippling is within 4 feet. Obviously, the further away you get, the more dispersed the gunpowder particles get, and so it's the pattern becomes less dense and becomes wider, so it spreads out in a cone. But that after about 4 feet with handguns, that's pretty much all bets off.
What would be the closest range you might see with this intermediate? If the outer limit's 4 feet, what would be the closest range you might see something you would classify as intermediate?
Well, I mean, with some guns, you can actually see some very small stippling around a wound, even at a ½ inch. But obviously, typically, as you get further away, that's when you start seeing the dense pattern, and you keep backing away. That pattern will widen out and become more sparse.
Okay.
Mr. Huebner, a couple more questions. I'm going to break. It's almost 4:50.
I'm really sorry, Judge. I thought we were making good time.
We're doing fine, but as you know, Chief Judge and County Exec are not going to let me work past 5 o'clock, so a couple more questions.
Yes, and I will not just speak quicker, Madam Court Reporter. Doctor, in terms of what you're looking at, beyond intermediate, is there another range of fire characteristic or another range that you guys sometimes refer to?
Beyond that, there are no characteristics. There's no stippling, and so we can only refer to those as indeterminate range. We can't determine the range.
Okay. Now, in this case, regarding Mr. Cleereman, the victim, did you see any range of fire characteristics on his body?
Yes.
What did you see?
He has gunpowder stippling surrounding this gunshot wound to the left eyebrow.
So, just so we're referring to what we're talking about here in State's Exhibit number 47, these little red pock marks, is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Okay. Is this kind of a more larger grouping of stippling?
I'm not sure how to answer that. I mean, I think what you're seeing in this photograph is the edge of it. There's much more stippling around it to the forehead.
I'm going to show you what has been marked as State's Exhibit number 48. Kind of another good one, because I'm trying not to get too many really gross photos here. But are we seeing it within, kind of around the eye?
Yes.
All right. Doctor, can you tell us where this is, anywhere within that, couple inches to 4 feet?
I really can't be more specific than that.
So it's an intermediate gunshot wound.
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, the state would move State's Exhibits numbers 49, 48, and 47 in evidence.
All right, they're received. Let's break there. Unless you had like one question.
I don't.
Okay. You can step down, doctor. We'll need you back tomorrow morning. For the jury, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to break there. It's about 4:50. I'm going to ask again that you're back tomorrow as you were today, 8:15 or 8:20, and we'll try to start as close to 8:30 as possible. I appreciate all of your attention today. It seems like you've been paying attention and listening to the witnesses and listening to the testimony. I appreciate that. The parties appreciate that. I always feel like I give these warnings too many times, but as you remember during voir dire, the state told you the story about the one case that had turned out to be a disaster in terms of the jury. So I trust you guys will follow the rules. Again, no deliberating in this case, no discussion of it. Please don't watch any or read any media attention to this case that's tonight or tomorrow or at any point in time in the next few days. Again, don't discuss anything about it. Don't do any research. We'll see you tomorrow. Please be here 8:15, 8:20. We'll try to start as close to 8:30 as possible. You can leave your notepads where they are. Have a good night. Thanks, everybody. Out, we're in recess. I want the lawyers and the parties back about 8:20. We're off the record.